The fall of the Roman Empire, the Great Depression, and the 2008 meltdown were not random disasters. They all followed the same predictable 8-stage script. And right now, with the U.S. national debt spiraling towards $39 trillion in early 2026, the whispers of collapse are growing louder. The question is no longer if history will repeat itself, but whether you'll recognize the next stages before it's too late. In today's video, we'll pull back the curtain on that historical playbook to reveal the 8 clear signs of collapse before what happens next is already written in the history books. Every great power in history eventually has a day of reckoning with its debt. From ancient Rome watering down its silver coins to modern nations firing up money printers, the story is shockingly similar. Debt becomes an addiction. Today, the United States is in a tough spot. The national debt is rocketing towards $39 trillion, which is roughly $114,000 for every single person in the country. The annual interest payments alone are projected to clear a staggering $1 trillion, consuming a massive share of the federal budget. And this isn't an abstract problem. It's the kind of pressure that forces governments into desperate choices that have historically ended in catastrophe. I've brought together the worst financial meltdowns to identify 8 distinct changes. Understanding them is your first step to protecting what's yours. The first stage is the death of your money. This isn't just a little inflation, this is hyperinflation. It's the complete destruction of your currency's value. The textbook case is Germany's Weimar Republic in the 1920s. To pay off crushing war debts, the government printed money until people were hauling wheelbarrows of cash to buy a single loaf of bread. An entire nation's savings vanished. Or you can look at Zimbabwe in 2008. The monthly inflation rate hit an estimated 79.6 billion %, and the government printed $100 trillion bills that were barely enough for a week's groceries. So how does this connect to today? The US is paying the interest on its massive debt by borrowing even more money, like paying off your Visa with a MasterCard and then paying off your MasterCard with an Amex. At some point, the only way out of that spiral is to create new money out of thin air. It's a process called monetizing the debt. The dollar already showed signs of serious weakness in 2025, weakening significantly. This is the start of the same path, where your savings buy a little less each month. Once the money dies, businesses are next. Stage 2 is a catastrophic spike in unemployment. During the Great Depression, this became a brutal reality. At its peak, unemployment in the US hit nearly 25%, which was 1 in every 4 workers. In Zimbabwe's crisis, the situation was even more dire, with unemployment estimates soaring as high as 80%. When an economy implodes, demand for everything simply evaporates, and businesses go bankrupt, and mass layoffs follow. So you can see how a modern parallel could unfold. Persistent inflation squeezes businesses from both sides. Their costs go up while their customers have less money to spend. It's a perfect storm for corporate failure that could force entire sectors, like retail, manufacturing, and services, to shed jobs, completely overwhelming any government safety nets. Next, when people lose faith in their money and their jobs, they'll lose faith in their banks next. Stage 3 is a full-blown financial panic kicked off by bank runs. This isn't ancient history. Between 1930 and 1933, while we did have entirely different banking systems then, over 9,000 banks failed in the United States, which was about a third of the entire banking system. All it took was a rumor of instability for depositors to rush and withdraw their cash. But banks don't hold your money in a vault. They lend most of it out. A run forces a bank to sell assets at fire sale prices, causing it to collapse and wiping out the savings of anyone who wasn't first in line. Today, even with deposit insurance, a collapse would just look different. Instead of lines around the block, we'd see a digital bank run, meaning millions trying to pull their money out online at the same time, which could crash servers and freeze the entire economy. When the financial world breaks, the physical world is not far behind. Stage 4 is the breakdown of supply chains, which leads to empty shelves and widespread hoarding. In 1990s Yugoslavia, hyperinflation and conflict shattered their supply lines, leaving stores empty of essentials like food and medicine. In Zimbabwe, the government tried to impose price controls, but that just destroyed any reason for businesses to produce or import goods, making shortages even worse. The United States relies on incredibly complex global supply chains. A devaluing dollar makes critical imports like oil, medicine, and manufacturing parts drastically more expensive. This shock would ripple through the whole system. You would see hoarding first, then the real thing. Empty shelves, gas stations with no fuel, and eventually the government stepping in with rationing. This is where self-reliance becomes critical. Economic desperation is gasoline on a social fire. Stage 5 is the breakdown of law and order with rising crime and widespread social unrest. History gives us a stark warning. The Great Depression was marked by massive, often violent, labor strikes and protests. When people can't afford to eat and feel they have nothing left to lose, desperation takes over. People who have never broken a law might turn to theft just to feed their families. Protests can escalate into riots and police departments get stretched thin. If the US were to, again, face anything like 25% unemployment, combined with hyperinflation, our social fabric would be torn to shreds. That anger would inevitably spill onto the streets, and trust in institutions would evaporate. People would be forced to focus on their own safety because help might not be coming. While the stock market is often seen as a sign of what's to come in a true collapse, it's also a massive domino waiting to fall. Stage 6 is the definitive crash of the stock market, wiping out trillions in paper wealth seemingly overnight. The most famous example is Black Tuesday in 1929, but this pattern repeats. Market crashes were also central to the financial panics of 1873, 1907, and the Great Recession in 2008. In these events, fear is everything. Investors panic and sell at any price, creating a self-feeding downward spiral. This doesn't just hurt Wall Street either, it vaporizes the 401ks and pensions of millions of regular people. So with US debt spiraling, a loss of confidence from foreign investors who hold trillions in US assets could trigger a massive sell-off. A crash of 30% or more would be catastrophic, and it would erase decades of savings and accelerate the entire economic collapse. When the official currency is worthless and the stores are empty, people turn to stage 7, which is the death of the formal economy and the birth of barter and black markets. In post-World War I Hungary, which saw horrific hyperinflation, people simply traded goods directly. The same thing happened in Zimbabwe, where the US dollar became the real currency on the black market long before the government admitted that its own was worthless. In this world, people with useful goods like food or fuel or valuable skills like doctors or mechanics are the ones who get by. People holding stacks of paper money are the ones that starve. In a modern US collapse, a box of ammunition or a bottle of antibiotics could suddenly be worth more than a wallet full of cash. Black markets would pop up for everything, operating outside of government control. It's a stark reminder that true wealth is what you can hold and what you can do. An economic collapse of this scale always leads to a political one. The final stage is government instability, where the people in power either lose control or are forced to take extreme measures to hold on. Economic crises have toppled regimes throughout history. The hyperinflation in the Weimar Republic destroyed public trust and directly fueled the rise of different political parties. The Great Depression led to a massive expansion of government power under the New Deal, and if a government is seen as responsible for the collapse, the people will demand radical change. This can lead to anything from brutal austerity measures to martial law or even a complete change in the system of government itself. A debt load closing in on $39 trillion puts the US government on a razor's edge. The choices it could force, like slashing services, raising taxes, or printing the currency into oblivion, would all trigger profound political instability and shed public trust. The historic playbook is clear. These 8 stages are a warning from the past, and acknowledging these risks isn't about fear, it's about empowerment. The people who suffer most during a collapse are always the ones who are unprepared. The first step is building your own resilience. Don't wait for empty shelves to think about food. Start building a small pantry. Don't wait for the banks to lock their doors to think about your wealth. Consider diversifying into tangible assets like precious metals or just regular tools. The goal is to reduce your dependencies on fragile systems that are showing cracks. Learn practical skills, build a strong community, and make a plan. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.